I really find it fascinating that NATO is expanding its focus not only on Russia, but also on China. So what's this report saying?
Yeah, it's quite a significant shift then from this alliance. They put together a study by a group of experts that were assembled by NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. And really, the outcome of this study is a clarion call for this 30-nation alliance to kind of wake up to the challenges posed by China as they see it. It includes recommendations around building out political cohesion in these member nations. They say as well that there should be more investment in terms of time and action, again, into facing up to what they say are the threats posed by China based on, quote, its economic heft and the stated ideological goals of its leaders. Now, after the study was published, Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, spoke to reporters and he said, quote, China is coming closer to us. And he pointed out the investment, the heavy investment in infrastructure in NATO countries, particularly in Europe. How feasible this is, though, particularly that call for greater political cohesion, is a big question mark, given that NATO has faced splits, particularly in the last 4 years. Largely, it should be said, fueled by Trump's kind of go-it-alone approach. So there'll be a hope that when Biden takes over come January the 20th, that it will be more feasible. By the way, later today, NATO's foreign ministers will be holding an online session with their counterparts in the Asia-Pacific region, and that will be a first, focused on China.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Prado of Man-Made Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel watching this video. Please share this information with everybody in your own social media. That way we can get this information out so people can start getting prepared. This video is part 4 of this video series that I've done this week. Hopefully you have watched part 1, part 2A, part 2B, part 3A, part 3B, and now part 4. I'm not 100% sure if part 4 is going to be split into 2 different ones, but if it is, then, you know, it's not a bad thing because there's a lot of information that has been coming out. And if I limit myself to 1 hour, then I feel like I'm limiting you on the information. So that is the reason why, you know, I'm starting to do this podcast to where I'm just bringing all the information that's coming out just in this 1 week and, you know, presenting it to you in this way. So hopefully you understand that. Hopefully it's, you know, it's not it doesn't discourage you from watching the videos or listening to the podcast, because I really do think that you need to get the bigger picture, which is what I'm doing in this podcast, right? This is the reason why I did it this way, made it into little series, is because there's a lot of information going on all at once, and if I don't bring it to you, you know, separately, then you won't be able to get the bigger picture. Now, on the first video, what we talked about is that we're experiencing food inflation here in the United States. And even though a lot of people are not paying attention right now because they can still afford it, I do believe it's going to get to the point where even if there's food at the grocery stores, a lot of people are going to have a difficult time buying groceries. So that's why it's important for you to prepare right now by stocking up on food. But not only that, also into making a system in your own home to where you can grow your own vegetables, you can have your own farm animals, and you know you can have a self-sustaining system, so you don't have to rely on the grocery stores and on the grid, pretty much, right? So that's what we talked about in the first video. On the second part, in which includes A and B, what we talked about is the economy, how the economy is eventually going to collapse here in the United States, but not so much for the reasons that we are printing so much money, but really the real reason that I believe is going to collapse the economy is when when the other countries all throughout the world get rid of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, and they run to China to become the next, you know, world currency. And the reason that I think that is going to happen, for one, is that they're working on it, right? China is working on it. Russia's working on it. All the other countries in Europe and Asia and Africa and even in South America, they're working their way into replacing the dollar because the dollar has lost a lot of its value. You know, a lot of its purchasing power. So people are not holding dollars anymore. They're looking for other things. That is one of the reasons why Bitcoin has shot up to levels that nobody thought ever possible. And it's also the reason why people are moving money out of the United States into different assets. So that is going to be the reason why I believe we're going to see hyperinflation in the United States. Because once they get rid of the US dollar as their world reserve currency, everyone is going to get rid of their dollars. The dollars are going to eventually make their way back into the United States. And, you know, the definition for hyperinflation means that the government prints money to pay for its bills. And quite frankly, the United States has not only printed money to pay for its bills, but also it has printed money to help other countries. So eventually that is all going to flow back into the United States, creating the hyperinflation that I've been warning for a year now. So that is what we talked about on the second part. Now, on the third part, we talked about how the United States government is talking about persecuting people here in the United States as terrorists just because of their political belief. And even though right now, you know, it's just rhetoric, people are talking about it, you know, the mainstream media is just running their mouth about it. We don't really have to worry about it until the government itself, until the military, until the Department of Homeland Security and others turn the weapons that we use against terrorists abroad against its own citizens. That's when we're going to see a big problem. That's where we're going to see a big revolution or even a civil war here in the United States. Now, I said all of that to say this. All of that is combined to what I'm going to be talking about in this video. If you remember, on the second part of the third video, I asked this question. Is God going to allow the United States to collapse because it has become too powerful? Therefore, because it's the number one country in the world as far as the military is concerned and even the economy, the United States government is going to have enough weapons to be able to persecute not only the Christians in the United States, but also any other citizen that does not line up with what they want to do. Would that be the reason why God would destroy America? You know, would it be a blessing in disguise? You know, it's something that we have to wonder. You know, I don't have the 100% answer on that, but we really have to sit and ponder. Now, we have to get ready for that day, because if it's true, you know, what I showed you on the second part of the third video is that Dmitry Duduman had a visitation from the Lord. And if it's real, right, if God really did show him this, if, you know, he did send an angel to show him what's going to happen, that, you know, God is going to judge America by letting Russia and China attack different cities, then we have to prepare for that, because, you know, we're being warned about it. If we don't prepare and it happens, then we have no one to blame but ourselves, because we could have done the things like getting away from those cities, you know, waiting for an invasion. You know, the grid is going to collapse because China has the doctrine of using EMP weapons. The food supply chain will collapse immediately because nothing will go anywhere. Wherever you find yourself in is where you're going to pretty much stay unless you can make yourself back home. So now with this video, what I want to do is, what is going to be the spark that's really going to make all of this go up in flames, right? That is going to launch World War III. So that's what I want to attempt to do in this video. I'm going to show you all the different articles that I found that really points us to the day that we are very close to go to war against China. And not only China, but Russia too, because, you know, NATO is very giddy about it and they really want to stay relevant. So therefore, they're trying to find some type of excuse not only to go against Russia, but also work its way into making alliances and going against China. So we have to make sure that we look at all these things going on and that we prepare for them, because if we don't, again, we have no one to blame but ourselves. That is the reason why I need you to share this information with your friends and family all throughout your social media. So not only can they get the information that I'm bringing to you, but also the proper way to prepare. In Texas was a big indicator that there is a proper way to prepare, because if we don't, then we're going to suffer the consequences for not preparing properly. Okay, so that's what I want to do in this video. So as you see, the reason that I made this into a big series, or, you know, a 4-part series, is because all of this goes together. Everything is happening at the same time, and we have to look at the bigger picture. All right, so the first headline that I have for you is this: China to sanction U.S. officials for nasty behavior over Taiwan. This from Reuters. U.S. officials who have engaged in nasty behavior over Chinese claim Taiwan will face sanctions, China Foreign Ministry said on Monday, after Washington lifted curbs on exchange between U.S. and Taiwanese officials. Further adding to China's anger, the U.S. ambassador to the United States, Kelly Craft, spoke last week to Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen after a planned trip to Taipei was called off. Asked at a daily news briefing how China would follow through on its pledge to make the United States, quote, pay a heavy price, end quote, for its engagement with Taiwan, Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying said some U.S. officials would face sanctions. Quote, owing to the wrong actions of the United States, China has decided to impose sanctions on responsible U.S. officials who have engaged in nasty behavior on the Taiwan issue. Okay, so the reason that I believe that this article is very important for you to know of its existence and what is in it is because we can start to see that China is becoming bold. Okay, they're preparing for the future. They're seeing the things that are happening. They're moving the piece around the chessboard, and they're making sure that they're going to be on top once everything in the United States collapses. That is the reason why they're preparing right now a digital Yuan, which, would be a cryptocurrency. And they're using the SWIFT system to make sure that they bring that about. Watch the second part of the third video, I believe. The second part of the second video, or the second part, to be able to get this information so you can get all of it. Now, if they're preparing themselves to do that, okay, and they're looking into the future, they're seeing that they're going to have the ability to sanction countries, to sanction people in the United States, to do whatever they want pretty much. And the reason that they are doing that, or they're getting bold into doing it, is because the United States is doing it now. Eventually, as I have said here in this podcast in the past, China is going to take revenge on the United States the same way that we have taken it against them. What we are doing right now, what we have done not only to China and Russia, but to several other countries, is that we use the SWIFT system in order for us to clobber those countries over the head. They do something we don't like, then bam, sanctions. That is the strongest tool we have outside of war. When war is not appropriate, we use the sanctions to make sure we punish that country very, very heavily. Now, the reason that is a big punishment is because if we're sanctioning them to where they cannot use companies or U.S. systems, then they cannot trade in dollars and stuff like that. And that could make their economy collapse because they don't have other means to be able to trade with other countries for the goods and services that they receive. That is the reason why the SWIFT system is very important. Now, China is taking advantage of that. They're seeing how the game is played. They're creating the crypto yuan, and they're partnering with SWIFT. Eventually, one day, SWIFT is going to give their back to the United States, and they're going to go with China. Okay, when that day comes, China will put sanctions on the United States. Now, let me remind you of this as well. The only reason Venezuela has been in hyperinflation mode for this long amount of time, one of the big reasons is because the United States has sanctions on them. And not only Venezuela is suffering sanctions, but Iran too. If you remember, about 2-3 years ago, the Trump administration put sanctions on Iran, forbidding all the other countries from trading with Iran. They couldn't, trade oil or anything like that. So it was a very big, devastating blow economically to Iran. It brought it to its knees. They were pretty much begging for forgiveness at one point, and until their arrogance and their pride pretty much took over, and then they just started looking for different ways. Now, between Venezuela and Iran, they saw a path of trading there because they're both under sanctions. If they're both under sanctions, then what is it going to matter if they're trading with each other when, they're in the same boat? So what they were doing is they were trading gold for oil and stuff like that. And the United States tried to stop them from being able to do that, but Russia and China stepped in to where they were helping Iran. Because Iran, or technically China and Russia, had big plans for Iran to have modern weapons in order for them to have a modern military. So, like I said, all this stuff, comes together. Now, that's how other countries have been suffering under the U.S. using the SWIFT system. Once China takes over the SWIFT system with the crypto yuan, our economy has collapsed. We have hyperinflation. We're in chaos all the other countries who are holding dollars, they're going to abandon their dollars and they're going to go to the yuan. Okay, that's going to make our country go into hyperinflation, and we're going to experience hyperinflation for several years. Now, that could be one of the sparks that starts World War III, because the United States could potentially see that that is what is happening. In desperation, they might try to attack Russia and China to make sure that they bring them down lower than the United States, so the United States can still be on top. You know, that is one possibility. I don't know if that's going to happen. We can only wait and see, you know, until we experience it. We'll know for sure. All right, so now bringing it back to Taiwan. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, technically Taiwan, but with China getting bold by going ahead and sanctioning U.S. officials, you know, that's just showing how bold China is becoming. They're also doing it with the military. Now, there's this video that I want to show you from Tom Cotton, and he's going to explain further, you know, in his own words, how these sanctions are going to be devastating in the long term. Not only for the individuals, but for other companies as well, because, you know, China's going to be twisting their arm. But before, you know, I spill it all here, I want to go ahead and share that video. Here it is.
Senator Tom Cotton was among the first lawmakers to raise the red flag on China's burgeoning military on this program. He joins us now. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Maria. Good to be on with you.
Let's start with these sanctions. What was your takeaway of what we saw this past week as China is now targeting additional individuals in America?
Maria, these sanctions against former Trump administration officials are a dangerous and insidious escalation of China's effort to influence American policy. On Wednesday, just moments after Joe Biden took office, a couple dozen Trump administration officials were sanctioned by China. Now, at first, one might just laugh them off. You know, I was sanctioned last summer, and I kind of laughed it off. But these sanctions apply not just to these individuals. They apply to any company or institution that associates with them. Now, this is not designed so much to punish Trump administration officials for taking a tough line on China, but to send a shot across the bow to Biden administration officials. Just let me give you a couple of examples of how these could influence a U.S. government official's thinking. So, for instance, many former officials like to write memoirs, and those memoirs can contribute to our understanding of public events. China specifically threatened publishing houses that give book contracts to administration officials they've sanctioned with cutting off all access for all their books from the Chinese market. Or to take another example, a lot of government officials are lawyers. They leave big firms, they go back to big firms. Even if they have no clients with any business in China, that law firm probably does. And what if China goes to one of those big corporations and threatens to cut off their access if they don't cut off that law firm? This is the kind of unspoken, insidious effect these sanctions can have on senior government officials. We cannot tolerate it. The Biden administration needs to denounce it forcefully. They need to impose reciprocal sanctions on Chinese officials. They need to find out if the Chinese ambassador was involved in it. And if so, they need to kick him out of the country. We cannot tolerate China trying to influence government officials at the highest levels of American government.
All right, so you just heard him say how devastating it would be for China to take that type of control. Now, if they're able to do that, you know, sanctioning people right now with the kind of power that they have, I mean, they are the second largest economy of the world, but with the influence that they have right now, if they're able to twist the arm of companies, firms, and all that stuff, then how much more power are they going to have later on once they are the world reserve currency? When they have that status and they have that power. As I mentioned a minute ago, if the United States is using that, you know, the SWIFT system with sanctions to clobber countries over the head, what's going to be like when those countries can turn back around and clobber the United States over the head? All right, that's what we're going to. Now, China has become so bold that they even have sanctioned Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon for selling arms to Taiwan. Okay, so Taiwan, it is a big deal for the reason being that we are there. We are patrolling the waters. We're making sure that they're not taken over by China. And actually, I have an article right here in front of me from the Financial Times. Oh, no, I almost jumped the gun. All right, so here's another way how China is actually becoming bold, okay? Because now they're looking, you know, they're trying to see if we have holes in our system. If there's any way that China can look and see they can penetrate the U.S. defense, whichever means necessary. Now, this headline that I have for you is from Financial Times, and the article, or the article title is China targets rare earth exports, curbs to hobble U.S. defense industry. China is exploring limiting the export of rare earth minerals that are crucial for the manufacture of American F-35 fighter jets and other sophisticated weaponry, according to people involved in a government consultation. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology last month proposed draft controls on the production and export of 17 rare earth minerals in China, which control about 80% of global supply. All right, so before I continue on the article, I do want to come back and comment on this because 80% of the global supply is a very big deal. All right, yes, the United States can let's say they are cut off for sure. The United States can look back, look around, see how they can, get the rare earth minerals from another place and all that. Even if the United States was to go out there and find the minerals, do the surveys, find it, start mining it, and then building a facility that's going to refine the minerals to whatever it is that they need it for whatever weaponry might include ICBMs, missiles, the F-35, as they said, whatever it is that they needed to, that's going to set the United States Defense Ministry or whatever back several years, all right? Because this is not going to be a quick fix. Or, they might throw so much money at it so they can get it done quickly because they really need it. But the point is that if China does do that, they're going to have to do it, at a strategic time. So it will be most devastating for the United States at a time where China has the advantage. All right, let's continue on with the article. Quote, the government wants to know if the U.S. may have trouble making F-35 fighter jets if China imposes an export ban, said a Chinese government advisor who asked not to be identified. Industry executives added that Beijing wanted to better understand how quickly the U.S. could secure alternative sources of rare earth and increase its own production capacity. Fighter jets such as the F-35, a Lockheed Martin aircraft, rely heavily on rare earth for critical components such as electrical power systems and magnets. A Congressional Research Service report said that each F-35 required 417 kilograms of rare earth minerals, for them to work. Now, that is very important because now we understand how much they're going to need for an F-35. If they need to go into the ground and find it and mine it and all that, it's going to make them step back. Now, the article did say China's government wants to understand how fast it would take or how long it would take them to be able to have their own rare earth mineral mining company or whatever to be able to give them those rare earth minerals. That way they can use that as leverage at a time when the United States is going to need it the most, at a time where China is going to be ahead. Now, before I continue into the next article, I do want to remind you that the World Economic Forum did say, right, their plan, which includes the United States, China, Russia, and all those, they have come together and they have said that they plan for the United States to no longer be the world's superpower by 2030. That implicates a lot of things because it's not just militarily, it's also economically. If the United States is no longer the superpower of the world in 9 years, then who is going to be? More than likely, they're going to set up China to be the next top dog, the number one world power, because that's China's ambition. That's the reason why they have built up their army and their military and their navy and everything else to the way it is today. Now, yes, China and the United States, if they go toe-to-toe, more than likely the United States would win because of all the airplanes we have and helicopters and missiles and, aircraft carriers and all those things. But once China involves other countries such as Russia, Iran, others, then that's when the United States could have a challenging time. That would be the reason why NATO would have to get involved. Now, Taiwan is one of those areas that we are very particular about because Taiwan does give us a lot of the chips, the computer chips that we need for cars, for the military, for places like that. Now, we all know that you don't mess with the military-industrial complex because they will get their way. You know, even if, let's say that Biden is a puppet of Beijing, even if that is true, more than likely, Beijing is not going to be able to control the military through Biden. You know, they will very easily just throw him overboard, and they will take over in order for them to be able to continue this war machine. Now, for them, going to war against China would be big bucks. But the point is that there's going to be a clash eventually in the future. And it doesn't matter who is, you know, controlling the military officially, because, you know, Biden is the legal commander-in-chief. There could be a split there, and then we can go to war because we have different, you know, the military has different interests than what the president might. All right, the next article shows my point, because there's different government officials who feel this way as well. All right, China invasion of Taiwan means war with the U.S., Tom Cotton argues. That's from Zero Hedge. Senator Tom Cotton on Thursday called for a new U.S. policy on what would happen in the event of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Currently, the U.S. arms Taiwan through weapon sales and maintains a policy known as strategic ambiguity, which means that the U.S. is not guaranteed to intervene if Beijing moves to take the island. Cotton said that he wants to make it crystal clear that a Chinese incursion on Taiwan means war with the U.S. The United States needs to be clear that we will not allow China to invade Taiwan and subjugate it. Case closed, no further debate, he said at a Reagan Institute event. Cotton made the comments while he presented his plan to take on Beijing economically. In the plan, Cotton called for an economic decoupling from China. Quote, "Our economy has become far too entangled with China's, providing the Chinese Communist Party with leverage over the U.S. government and industry. It's past time we decouple from China," end quote. Cotton's report came after the U.S. Chamber of Commerce released a study that said that the U.S. gross domestic product, which is the GDP, would see a one-time loss as much as $500 billion if the U.S. companies have foreign direct investment in China. Besides the hit to the U.S. GDP, decoupling with China would give Washington and Beijing less reason not to go to war if a naval incident happens in the South China Sea, where the U.S. has stepped up its military presence and frequently sells warships. All right, that's where we see the two differences between what, you know, people believe about Biden being the puppet of Beijing and what the military is doing. All right, so if the military is just doing their own thing and they're sending this, you know, teams out there to the South China Sea, there's going to be a war. Something's going to spark, and they're going to make World War III come out. Now, Tom Cotton is not the only senator who feels this way about Taiwan and China. There's another one. I cannot remember his name right now, but I did report on it, to where he wanted to pass a bill, which quite frankly and very surprisingly had support from Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, that said that if China did anything against Taiwan, we would go directly to war against China. You know, it would be an automatic declaration of war. And, you know, no votes needed. It kind of would be like a knee-jerk reaction, right? So anyways, I don't think that they did pass it, but I do know that, I do remember reporting that it had support. Now, I guess we're going to wait and see whether or not it did pass into law. But the point is that that is a real threat. And like I said a minute ago, the reason that we want Taiwan so bad, or not want, but we want to make sure that they have their independence, quote unquote, is because they provide a lot of our chips, you know, for computers and stuff like that. And they're the number one place in the world that have the engineers and the plants and all the stuff to be able to manufacture what we need. So again, that's an interest of the United States, and more than likely the military, because, you know, the military is the ones that are out there looking around, you know, doing the freedom of navigations and all those things, even though China has told us repeatedly not to do those things because they believe that they own all that seawater and all that land and everything like that. But of course, we don't see that, so we go through there anyways. Now, we have come very close to really having confrontation between the two naval parties in the past. So when are we going to see that they open fire on each other, or that we see that an aircraft carrier of the United States was sunk by, the Chinese military, or whatever the case may be? Once we see that report, just know we're moments away from the U.S. being nuked here on the homeland. So be prepared for that. And even if it doesn't happen, you still have to be prepared. All right. But as if you remember, just digressing for a second, if you remember when we had the whole deal with North Korea, where they were threatening on sending a nuke, to United States shores, I reported here, and I did show you, and it came out that said that if North Korea sent several, I think it was 10 nukes our way, we probably would be lucky to get one out of the air. That's what they were saying. And that's what I remember reporting. Now, what would it look like if China did that? Or if Russia and China both together did that at the same time? How many would come through? That is the reason why we have to be prepared at all times. We cannot wait for something to happen in order for us to say, okay, we should have been ready. That is exactly the same attitude that is happening in Texas right now. There's a lot of people who depended on the grid, who depended on the government, and once something out of the ordinary happened, the entire system fell apart. That is the reason we're prepared, and we have to prepare properly, which is something that I'll be talking about in the next podcast, which is very important. So I really hope that you come back and you tune in and listen to it, because I'm going to talk about a lot of things that are very important. All right, so moving on. I have another article right here from the Express in the UK, and the title is South China Sea. Biden issued chilling warning as war with Beijing, quote, more likely than ever, end quote. Joe Biden has been warned by a panel of foreign policy experts that war in the South China Sea over Taiwan between Washington and Beijing is, quote, more likely than ever, end quote. A report from the Council of Foreign Relations think tank has told the U.S. president a, quote, severe crisis, end quote, in the South China Sea could start this year. All right, I want to pull back just a little bit before I continue on. If they're warning that could happen this year, that doesn't just mean, where we're talking words and we're flipping each other off. No, they're talking about an exchange of weapons, projectiles flying from one place to another. That's why they're warning here. That could happen this very year. Now, let me ask you this question. Are you ready for that right now? If you live in Texas with the preps you had, were you ready for that? What about World War III? That is the questions that we have to ask ourselves. Let's continue. It points to China's increasingly aggressive action towards Taiwan, leading to a, quote, dangerous flashpoint, end quote, for the U.S. The CFR's annual preventive priority survey has highlighted that potential risk of war in Taiwan has risen to a top-tier conflict. Experts contributing to the report say Taiwan in particular is growing into, quote, the most dangerous flashpoint in the world for a possible war that involves the United States, China, and probably other major powers, end quote. That is the biggest takeaway that we need to get from this, because they know that if we go to war against China, more than likely Russia will get involved to help China, because, they have a common enemy, which is the United States. And I've said this here time after time after time. If Russia and China, if the United States and China go to war, more than likely the U.S. will win. If Russia and the United States go to war, more than likely Russia would win because they have more advanced weapons. But it would be a close call. I guess we would wait and see. But if Russia and China go together against the United States, there's no way we win. All right. The Pentagon has actually ran simulations to see what would happen if we would go to war against either Russia or China individually, not together. And the Pentagon said that by 2030, we will lose a war against China. So we have, let's just say 10 years. We're 10 years away from China surpassing us militarily. What I've said here is that would mean that the Pentagon would have to attack, there's no question about it. They would have to attack China long before that ever happens in order for us to be able to be on top and be able to defeat China. If we wait for the moment that they're stronger than us, there's no way we can win. And the same thing, the same simulation was run against Russia, and there too we lost. And I think for them was 2028. The point is that we're just several years away. All right. So even if there's no war, you still have to prepare like there's going to be a war this year, because that's what they're saying. Taiwan could be the flashpoint this year. Okay. This is not to frighten you. This is for you to pay attention to everything that's going on. That is the reason why I did all these series, because first we had the food inflation. On top of that, we have the decoupling of the U.S. dollar, the deterioration of it. Then we have potential civil war here in the United States because of the persecution, which that would bring in the prophecy from Dmitry Duduman saying that something in the middle of the country breaks out. There's opposition of some sorts to where the government is busy putting it down. And because they're busy, that gives the green light to Russia and China to attack the United States. Now, which one of all of this is going to be the flashpoint that starts World War III or gives Russia and China the green light to be able to attack America? Which one is it? Now, I hope you see how this is, at least what I'm trying to do here, is how this is all this is part of the bigger picture. All right, so the next headline that I have for you is very important because this is also going to involve NATO. And this is the last article of the night. So it looks like this will not be that long of a video as the other ones were. But nonetheless, this is very, very important. All right, this is from news.antiwar.com. NATO chief says the rise of China is a defining issue for the alliance. In an effort to stay relevant, NATO is looking towards Asia to join the U.S. in countering China in the region. During Friday's Munich Security Conference, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made it clear that Beijing is a top priority of the alliance. Quote, the rise of China is a defining issue for the transatlantic community, with potential consequences for our security, our prosperity, and our way of life. This is why NATO should deepen our relationship with close partners like Australia and Japan and forge new ones around the world, end quote. At the end of 2020, NATO released a report that called for the alliance to increase its focus on China. The report said NATO should build stronger relationships with countries in Asia like Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea, what it calls like-minded countries. The report says NATO should consider forming a partnership with India, a country the U.S. has been stepping up military cooperation with. The U.S., India, Japan, and Australia formed the informal alliance or dialogue known as the Quad, a group NATO is keen to work with. The Quad is seen as possible foundation for a NATO-style military alliance in Asia. Okay, so that is what they're planning on doing. But quite frankly, can we really afford it? Right now, the United States is, with the real figures, we're over $30 trillion in debt. 32 if they do pass this stimulus by the end of February, towards middle of March. If they do pass it, then we're at $32 trillion in debt. How much money are we going to throw not only at NATO, but also at a NATO-style military alliance in Asia? What I really do believe is that Russia and China only have to wait for the United States to implode economically, and they're going to be able to take over without a war. Because we can no longer afford to be doing all those things. I mean, they're gonna keep this machine rolling until it falls off the cliff. And you have to not only enjoy the time until that happens, but get prepared for when that happens. All right. That is the reason, again, I bring you all this information for the bigger picture. All of this is probably already gone off the cliff, right? We're probably already just in free fall going all the way to the bottom. We are seeing all these events going on all at once. Therefore, we have to prepare right now. Now, what I've been saying is that the prepper community has always taught from the time that I started prepping until now, right? That you have to buy and stock up and just wait for that one moment for things to hit, for crap to hit the fan, and then you spring into action with your preparedness. But quite frankly, we have to change that lifestyle, that way of thinking about the prepper community. It's no longer about the one event. It's really about all these series of events that are happening all at once, that are coming out incrementally, but very slowly. So if we prepare in such a way to where we change the way we think about preparedness from being just stock up and buy, to where we have a lifestyle of being self-sufficient, that everything that we stocked up on is just because it's going to be a safety net for us to be able to fall back on if what we're trying to put on the ground to grow ourselves and, you know, to feed our chickens and to feed our rabbits and all that fails. You know, falling back into the safety net is going to give us the push that we're going to need to be able to, you know, get all this out of the ground again and then start sowing again and then growing animals again and all that stuff. All right, because if we don't do that, then we're always going to be just however many months we have worth of food away from becoming a marauder yourself, right? That is what the prepper community prays for. Like, you know, like if anybody tries to come to your door, you just blast them away because they're coming to take your stuff. But quite frankly, people in the prepper community is not asking, what am I going to do once my stuff runs out? Am I going to go out there and then, you know, go into somebody's house to, you know, to take their stuff away? That is the reason why I do believe that we have to come together as a community, that we have to make sure that we will have the infrastructure in place for us to be able to start a prepper community once crap hits the fan, right? Once crap hits the fan, all the other neighbors are going to look for that leader to say, what are we going to do now? You know, the supply chain has fallen apart. There's no electricity. The grocery stores are empty. The police, it might still be there, but it's not responding as quickly as it used to. What are we going to do? That's when the preppers can step up and say, this is what we need to do in order for us to be able to come together as a community and feed everybody, you know, keep everybody safe, keep everybody warm, keep everybody cool. But we must come together and start working the land now. All right, here in the United States, I don't know where you may be around the world listening to this, but here in the United States, we're about, I would say about a month away from spring. I really do believe that there should be millions of people becoming farmers this year alone, you know, in the next month, because of what we have seen, not only in Texas, but also, you know, with the food scarcity and with all the food lines that we're seeing from 2020 up until now. I really do believe those people should become farmers in their own house this coming spring. All right, Joe Biden's going to be sending them a lot of money. And there's going to be some people in all that group of millions of people who are getting that money to where they were still working. And that's just going to be something that they're going to add to their savings if they don't blow it on something, right? Because I have heard people where I work that they're going to be buying the PlayStation console, that they're going to be buying another Switch, that they're going to be buying a car, that, you know, they're going to be doing a bunch of stuff. I mean, they already spent the money. They don't even have it yet. What I'm saying is that all those people who have the ability to still work and they're receiving that money, for them to have the initiative to start putting a self-sustaining system in their home. Hopefully, if you live in an apartment and you're still working and, you know, your life has continued, quote unquote, you know, normal as much as possible, that you look into buying a house, and when you're ready for that step, for you to buy a house out in the country, in a rural area, with at least 5 acres, for you to be able to set up a system that's going to be self-reliant. If you right now live in the suburbs, right, and you have, you know, a 1/4 acre or an 1/8 of an acre or a 1/3 of an acre, that you look into selling that house and moving out into the rural area to where you can have at the very least 5 acres, where you can set up the infrastructure for you to have, you know, chickens and have a garden and have a pond or have a river going through it, or, you know, being able to do all those things that are going to prepare you properly for all these things that's going on. Because let's say we don't have a war, right? Let's say that just China and Russia say, you know, we just have to wait. We have to be patient for the United States to collapse on its own, because economically they're in ruins. And when that happens, then we'll just come on the scene, you know, and we'll take over, right? That would be the peaceful transition, even though it's going to be very they're gonna have their boot on our throat. But the point is that there will be no nukes flying around everywhere, right? But let's say even if that doesn't happen, we still have this economic collapse looming over our heads here in the United States, and quite frankly all throughout the world, because if the United States dollar goes, for at least for a little while, all the other countries are going to feel the pain. Now, not only that, but also the food inflation, the food scarcity, the how the weather is affecting to where there's food being, the weather is destroying the crops. That's what I was trying to say. That's what we saw in this past winter storm. Like, everything that came down, all that Arctic air came down in the bread basket of America. And now the reports are coming out. If you remember in the previous podcast, I did tell you, these weather events are happening. They're eventually going to say that there is going to affect our crops. I said, watch out for it. I tweeted it out on brightion.com, and, people liked it and stuff, and they commented on it. But I did warn, because I've seen this pattern in the past. Now, this is a worse weather event that we have had, and now the reports are coming out that because of that winter storm, peaches are going to be out, right? That wheat is probably going to be reduced. That all these things that has been happening is going to affect the supply chain here in the United States, which is one of the things that I'm going to be talking about in the next podcast. So it's really important that you come back and tune to it. Okay, so I want to go ahead and leave things there. Oh, before I go, it just popped into my head. The locusts have come back, and I'm gonna make sure that I edit that video here. The locusts have come back in Africa, and they're eating all the crops again. If you remember on the first part of this series, on the first video, I talked about how the African countries, the poor countries, they're already having a hard time feeding their people. With this locust coming on the scene, it's going to make it even more difficult for the UN to be able to step up and be able to help those families survive. Okay? That's why it's important for you to see what's going on everywhere else and prepare now. So please share this information with your friends and family. Please visit the Meme and Survival store so you can get whatever you need for preparedness. Not only does that help me, but it also helps you, because the things that are on there is going to help you survive. And even if you don't visit the store to buy something, please visit it to get the free book that I'm giving away. On the front page of the book, on the front page of the store, you're gonna be able to see the link that is gonna be on there for you to order the free book that I'm giving away. I do want to let you know that the book is free, but we need help with shipping. The book retails for $24.99 plus shipping. All right, if you are getting it for free because I'm taking away the price of the book, so you're only paying for shipping. Shipping is $9.99. So if you were to buy the book plus the shipping, it would be $35 plus tax, and that is something that you're not doing. So you are getting it for free, $9.99. So please get it, get the information that's on it, and pass it along to your friends and family so they can start getting prepared. All right, I'm working on another book right now, and that one is more detailed on preparedness. The first one that I made it more like a generalized scenarios, because I was coming into the scene as a podcaster and turning this into a business. But now on this second book is going to be more specific on preparedness, on exactly what you need, on gear, on the land, on stuff like that, on the things that I teach you here every single day. But it's going to be on print, and it's going to be more detailed, because I have the ability to sit here and think on the things that I want to tell you, rather than for them to try to come in my mind as I talk about this on the podcast. So I really hope you enjoy this podcast. Please share this with your friends and family. Please prepare, because we've seen that there's difficult times ahead of us, but you have the benefit of foresight or hindsight, because if you did not know this, you know it now, and you can prepare accordingly. All right, so again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
Continuing fallout from that catastrophic winter storm that slammed the central and southern U.S. this week. At least 46 deaths are linked to the storm. Texas is the epicenter of the disaster. Overnight, this hotel north of Austin was engulfed in flames. It was filled to capacity, and most of the guests were people displaced by the storm. Everyone made it out safely. The power is back on for the vast majority of customers throughout the state following 5 days of blackouts and sub-freezing temperatures. But this morning, a new crisis is emerging. The effects of the storm leaving food and safe drinking water in short supply for millions of Texans. Omar Villafranca is in Dallas. Omar, any good news for us?
Not quite yet. So many pipes and water mains burst across the state that about 7 million people, a quarter of the state's population, they don't have access to safe drinking water, and they're under a boil advisory. You can see the Dallas skyline behind me that's starting to turn back on as power gets back on the grid, but now leaders are playing the blame game.
Now, what happened is ERCOT fell short.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott laying the blame on ERCOT, the nonprofit cooperative that manages almost all of Texas's power grid. Abbott calling for state lawmakers to investigate and to winterize power generators to prevent future cold weather outages.
Even if it means the state stepping up, providing funds to ensure that all of the machinery that froze up and was unable to generate the power you need, that may require funding. The state of Texas should step up and provide that funding.
But investigations and upgrades will wait for another day. With safe water in short supply for millions, Texans lined up Friday. 13,000 cases of water were given away at this distribution site in Houston, one of dozens statewide.
I'm under a boil notice, too, in Fort Worth. But I have no water coming in my home whatsoever. I've got 6 little ones that I need to take care of.
Been up since 5 o'clock. And I've been on the road since 6. And I know it's at 11:30, but I'm going to sit here until, I have no choice. All the stores in my area are out of water.
With many store shelves bare, food banks are seeing a spike in demand. In the Dallas area this weekend, they're preparing to give out 25,000 meals.
We definitely anticipate there's going to be a surge in the need for emergency food.
All I did was put out the call and say, hey, I need help. They said, we'll be there.
Bob Stevenson is one of nearly a dozen Dallas area restaurant owners cooking and serving hot meals to anyone finding it hard to feed themselves this week.
Packing is in full swing.
And more help came from hundreds of miles away. Charity workers for a Jewish organization in New Jersey drove through the night to deliver traditional Friday night Shabbat meals for a Dallas congregation.
Here we go. Mission Dallas, Texas.
President Biden is expected to sign a major disaster declaration, which will bring more federal aid to the state. And President Biden may also visit, but only if it doesn't disrupt the relief efforts. And, Jeff, it's also worth noting that Mother Nature is actually going to cooperate because the high temperatures across the state as we begin cleanup will be in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Finally, some good news. All right, Omar, thank you very much.
The Man-Made Survival Show.